Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Student First, Athlete Second IG Live. I am your host, David Watts, and this is episode number 105. I am super excited for you all to be joining us. Our featured guest is none other than legendary Hall of Fame prep sports columnist from the LA Times, Mr. Eric Sondheimer. So we're super excited for you all to be joining us. Mr. Sondheimer will be hopping on in just a few moments. Just wanted to let you guys know all previous 104 episodes can be seen on the David Watts Consulting YouTube channel. So we're super excited for you guys to be continuing to support us, to watch our IG Lives, and to share our IG Lives. So thank you again. Once again, we're just waiting for our special guest to pop in. But while we're waiting, I just wanted to give a quick little promo of this book here. It's called Transition Game: How Basketball Culture Has Failed in 99%. Very important book that all student athletes, basketball players, coaches, parents must read. This book really focuses on the student identity of basketball players. It talks about, just making sure that your student athletes have balance, making sure that your student athletes really focus on not only the hoop game, but also the game in terms of being whole, in terms of an all-around student athlete, focusing on school, focusing on talents and gifts outside of that. So please pick up this book and you'll be good to go. I see you, Mr. Sondheimer. Let's see here if this works. Sent you an invite. Let's see if this will work. There we go. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know. I don't usually do Instagram, so I'm in deep trouble. So
It's all good. It's all good. I appreciate it. I know that Dodger game is coming on at about 6 p.m., so I'm going to get you on and get you out of here before that Dodger game starts.
no problem. My apologies. Sorry about that. So,
all good. All good. So, but I just want you to sit tight. I'm going to read your bio, and then we'll go ahead and do the opening.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Student First, Athlete Second IG Live. I am your host, David Watts, and this is episode number 105. We've been doing this Student First, Athlete Second IG Live since January of 2021, and our whole goal is to inform, inspire, and motivate young student athletes. So we've had Super Bowl champions, we've had authors, college coaches, folks who work in professional sports, folks who work in mental health field, all in the premise of helping student athletes and helping student athlete families. So with that being said, our featured guest for tonight's Student First, Athlete Second IG Live is none other than Mr. Eric Sondheimer. Eric Sondheimer is a prep sports columnist for the Los Angeles Times. He has been honored 7 times by the California Prep Sports Writers Association for Best Prep Sports Column. A graduate of Cal State Northridge, Go Matadors, he joined the Daily News as a prep editor in 1980. He left for 18 months in 1990 to be the West Coast correspondent for the National Sports Daily. He returned to the Daily News in 1991 and joined the LA Times in 1997, covering high school sports. He has covered Southern California high school sports for more than 40 years, folks. This young man is a living legend in Southern California sports, and I want you guys to give him his due. I'm honored to have Mr. Sondheimer as a guest on the IG Live. I've been following his work for well over 20 plus years, and he is truly a staple in the Southern California prep sports scene. Without any further ado, Mr. Sondheimer, welcome to the Student First, Athlete Second IG Live.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the comment.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just wanted to go at the very beginning of our IG Lives. I always like asking our guests, some rapid fire questions. And I just wanted to throw some questions your way very quickly. The first answers that come to your mind, just shoot them out there. It doesn't have to have a lot of rhyme or reason. So Question number one, your favorite high school sport that you enjoy covering the most?
Well, it used to be basketball, but then we had all kinds of transfers, so I guess football now.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Question number two. I have learned through reading your content that you're a huge horse racing fan, right? I've learned
Yep.
that. I've learned that.
Yes, that's true. I've owned five horses, through five horses partially at times. So, but I've
Wow.
always liked horse racing.
That's incredible. I'm kind of a horse racing fan myself. I grew up in Northern California, going to Bay Meadows and Golden Gate Field, so that's kind of in my blood as well. But my question for you is your favorite all-time horse?
That would probably be the horse that I bet $100 to show on, and it was a heavy favorite, and I made like $20 on. That's a Hidden Light. So odds-on favorite, and that was crazy when I was young and didn't know what I was doing, and nerve-wracking and I bet the show no less. So I think it returned 220 or whatever. So yeah. So that was my favorite horse through the years. That was a Charlie Whittingham and Bill Shoemaker horse back in the 80s, I believe.
I love it. I love it. I love it. You can, man, it's funny how you can remember those names of those jockeys. I mean, I can remember Russell Bays like it was yesterday. Growing up, seeing him out there in Northern California. Question number three. In all your years and experience of covering high school sports, in your estimation, not anybody else's, I want to know the most dedicated and loyal high school fan base. What high school program would you say?
That's a difficult question because it always depends on the year and the sport. Out in the Trinity League, Servite is certainly a fan base that you have to admire. That the students go out there and they do incredible amount of make an incredible amount of noise, and they're entertaining. So if you have to say over through the years, I would say Servite because they do so well in football and basketball. It's always fun to go out and see one of the games that they're involved in.
Well said. Well said. Well said. Question number four, second to last question here. Your greatest high school sports moment that you've ever covered?
Well, I can just tell you the video moment. It was 5 years ago, and I recently retweeted that when I went to a City Section playoff game, and I didn't realize that the head coach for Roy Ball had cancer and was dying until like moments before the game. And so the game ended with his team winning a city title, and I was just sitting at the scorer's table taking pictures of the team celebrating, and he collapsed, just put his head down on the court and just started crying. And then one player came there to help him, and then another player, and they were in the end they were surrounding him, and it was so emotional. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, I just kept the camera on the kids as they came, and it's the most emotional moment I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like it before or since. And he was such a great man that I came to learn about him, and he ended up dying months later. But I mean, it was so emotional just to see that and that emotion out there.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. I remember seeing that video. Wow. That must have been emotional for everybody involved.
Yeah.
Wow. Last and final question in the rapid fire round here is I want to know who you think, in your eyes, is the greatest high school female student athlete that you've covered and greatest male high school athlete in Southern California area.
Right. Well, John Elway for sure for the male. I mean, he was the first star athlete that I was able to cover back when he showed up from Washington to Granada Hills High. His dad got hired at Cal State Northridge. I happened to be just graduating from high school in '76 when he showed up. And so when you get to see a future Hall of Famer as one of the first athletes you ever cover in a 48-year and going career,
wow.
I feel sorry for everybody else because they get compared to him and they're never going to pass him. So as far as female, there's been some great athletes. The Howard sisters at Kennedy High were tremendous track athletes through the years, became Olympian. I think Juju Watkins from Sierra Canyon is going to go down as one of the greatest. She's just starting out. She was an All-American as a freshman at USC. So I look for her. Obviously, Cheryl Miller was great, but I didn't really cover her that much because she was for Riverside Poly, and I was working primarily in the San Fernando Valley. Same with Lisa Leslie, was playing for from Morningside, I believe it was, or I think so. And I wasn't covering other than the Valley at that time. So I didn't really get to see the top girl athletes because you have to remember girls sports didn't get going until the 80s. And and I mainly covered San Fernando Valley, and there weren't as many great athletes from the girls' perspective in the Valley in those days. It was mostly in the inner city and the southern section in those days. Since then, since I moved to the LA Times in 1977, I got to cover now all of Southern California. So the quality has really increased. It had some amazing softball pitchers and players and volleyball players and swimmers. And so it's now evened out.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I have always appreciated about you is the fact that, like, you know, your origins started with the city section, John Elway, Granada Hills, this, that, and the other, but sort of the tide has turned now, and a lot of the city section teams aren't as strong as they once were, but you haven't left the coverage. You have still covered them, and I really appreciate you doing that because, you know, it's something that I feel like a lot of folks in these current days don't necessarily know or remember how strong those city sections were. Talk a little bit about the strength of the city sections in the 80s and early 90s and how formidable those teams were in all sports.
Right. Well, your point is well taken. The city has definitely dropped. It's not necessarily because of one thing or the other. There's been demographic changes and so forth. Yeah, I mean, you had Banning and Carson that were compete and beat the best Southern section teams in the 70s when you had great coaches there. Players were going there, not to St. John Bosco, not to Mater Dei. And then everything changed with transportation changes and parents be willing to drive further. Uber, you can be Ubered to your school now. Buses, there's, you know, Metro and other things. And yeah, the city has taken a down, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. There's still some very good city section players. I mean, Arenas goes to Chatsworth High. He's one of the best basketball players anywhere. He's been there. This will be his third year playing basketball there. There's always been great city section baseball players from El Camino and other places. And football-wise, you always have some good players. It's just not as many, and there's been a lot more schools that have come about. Remember, the city section used to be, I believe it was like 19 schools, and it's expanded to well over 120 now when you count all the charters. I think even 150, depending on what sport they're doing. So a lot of the charter schools have taken away a lot of athletes from the regular schools, so it's a lot fewer enrollments. So like Crenshaw used to be 3,000 enrollment, now it's sometimes 545, something like that. So that's a big demographic change that people don't realize. But yeah, it's definitely important in my priority to make sure that I look for city section stories. And there's great stories there. People actually, the coach, if you're coaching the city section, you're sacrificing a lot. You don't get paid a lot. There's so many obstacles to overcome. And if you're sticking it out and actually doing a good job, and there's a lot of coaches doing a good job, then to me that's unbelievable. Look what Elijah Sante is doing at Hamilton. He got hired a week before this season was to begin, and he's teaching them so many important lessons. Regardless of they're 1-5, but you know the lessons they're learning. They get dressed up in a suit and tie now. I mean, I saw it from myself. You know, they're learning everything for life. You know, even though they might be not winning in the games. I mean, that's what I think the coaches need to do now in the city section is focus on preparing them for college, regardless of their record, and enjoy it. That's why we have kind of some disconnect going on. We have a little controversy in the Marine League where the coaches are boycotting playing Narbonne. They really haven't submitted any evidence right now of rule violations, but I understand the frustration they're having. They're local schools. They want to try and be part of the high school education experience. They're concerned about the future. And I think it's important that this gets talked about. I know that it's reached a point as far as transfers are concerned,
Yes.
but the city section is kind of stuck. I mean, if you don't give them evidence, there's nothing they can do.
Absolutely.
So that's where
Absolutely.
we're at as far as that's concerned.
Well said. Well said. I mean, you just got such a wealth of knowledge and history and expertise following. I remember reading a book, and it was talking about those Crenshaw baseball teams with Darryl Strawberry and things of that nature. And it talked about that CIF game that was against Granada Hills and John Elway. Can you talk a little bit about that game? I'm sure you were probably there covering it.
I don't remember if I was or not, but I definitely know about it because I did a look back at that story. And yeah, John Elway actually did pitch to Darryl Strawberry, came off the bench. That he was a great athlete. Obviously, he could have played baseball. He did play minor league baseball for the Yankees. Strawberry, incredibly, Crenshaw made it to the finals. I mean, that was a different year. I mean, there's no way that a team from the Coliseum League will ever probably make it to a top of the level championship game in the city section ever again. But they had some great athletes, and that was again a great time. Granada Hills was coached by Darryl Strawberry, the guy who won games because they bunted a lot and they forced the defense to play defense by bunting. There were teams would just throw the ball away because they couldn't do a sacrifice or anything. But I remember Elway, as I understand, came in and pitched really well. And Stroh didn't even know if he wanted to bring in Elway because he hadn't pitched well in recent weeks. But as usual, when the pressure is on, Elway usually delivered. So that's how they were able to win it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you sharing those stories, man. This is stuff that, you could probably write a book, and I think eventually you should write a book and talk about your support of high school student athletes. But, for those guests that are just joining us, our featured guest is none other than Mr. Eric Sondheimer. He's a legendary Hall of Famer, prep sports columnist from the LA Times, over 40 plus years. The exact 48 years, and that's phenomenal of the amount of student athletes and folks that he's covered and over the years. And Eric, I just kind of wanted to open up with, you have done such a great job over the years of featuring other people, and I think that the thing that I wanted to know is, I like speaking to people like you who do the covering and the broadcasting and the journalism and things of that nature, because I want you to be able to share your story. So talk to us a little bit about your upbringing, where you grew up, if you played sports growing up as a kid, just anything upbringing in terms of what made you the person that you are today.
Yeah. Well, me and Gail Goodridge went to the same junior high and the same high school. So let's put it that way. Madison
Poly,
Junior.
right? Poly?
Yeah. Madison and junior high and Poly High. So always proud to say that. At Madison, I went out for the basketball team, like as a seventh grader. I was cut, and then that's where I went into journalism because I learned that I had more influence covering the game than actually playing in it. So you got to write about the team. All the kids on the team liked getting their names in the paper, the school paper. So you ended up becoming popular that way, kind of. But, never was going to be a basketball player, but it was fun to end up writing about it. I have a brother who's 3 years older that was into journalism. So that probably helped propel me also to doing that. And I wrote for the school paper at Madison, the school paper at Poly, then wrote for the Daily News as a stringer. Then Cal State Northers wrote for their newspaper and was hired at the Daily News. After I graduated in 1980, I basically was hired by Cal State Northers to be their sports information director because the Daily News didn't have a job for me. So I definitely didn't want to be unemployed. So I took that job, and then suddenly they came back with a full-time job. So I immediately had to turn that down and become the writer that I wanted to become. I really didn't want to become a PR writer. I enjoyed newspapers. So that's how that got started.
Wow. 7th grade. That is awesome. That is awesome to know that you found your passion in 7th grade. What was it about writing in journalism that you felt like, was your thing? Were you good at English or good at stories, or what was it about it?
Well, when you're as small as I was, you don't have a future playing basketball. So, but again, it's the fun of getting to be able to be part of something that you enjoy, sports.
Yeah.
And so this was a way to stay involved by being a sports journalist. You know, you get to go to all the matches. I actually competed in the flag football game, and I'm always proud that they actually ran a picture in the yearbook of me pulling down a flag. So that kind of shows I had a slight athletic ability, as long as it was flag football and not tackle football. But yeah, you know, each step of the way at Poly High, I was the basketball manager, and it was a great training ground. I got to see behind the scenes a great coach in Doug Michelson. I got to be there in the locker room and hear him talk. I got to be there when he would show strategies and discuss things, and it was a great insight for me of what happens, how coaches deal with players, etc. I after graduating from high school, I actually spent a part of my next year being a coach as an assistant JV coach, and that lasted not very long because I started getting stomach pains. I was feeling so much pressure to win as an assistant coach. I said, I'm not doing this. This is ridiculous. I can't even get through a practice without, you know, and I would be getting an ulcer or something. And so that helped me get out of that. I was thinking about being a teacher, but that wasn't going to work. There was just too much pressure. And of course, there's the biggest pressure for being a journalist as it was and used to be deadlines, because we had to have the stories done by a certain times. Now our deadlines are so early at 3 o'clock that I don't have to worry about deadlines anymore. You just put it online whenever you're done.
No, that's wow. That is amazing. And that's one of the things why I wanted to bring you on this show, is because I know that you got a lot of young people who enjoy sports. They enjoy playing. You got some that are really great at the early ages and in high school, and sometimes they're fortunate enough to go play at the college level. But for any student athlete or any student in general who's looking to get into journalism, what advice would you give a student athlete who's looking to get into journalism and starting early, finding a mentor and things of that nature? Because the reason why this is such an important field is very similar to you, is this is a career that you could be in sports for a lifetime.
Right.
And I feel like we have so many people chasing the dream of being a college player that only lasts 4 to 5 years, or a pro player that only has, you know, the average career of 2 to 3 years, that I feel like for a lot of young people that enjoy sports, that enjoy watching sports and covering it, it's a great option. So what type of advice would you give a young person who's ready to jump off a career in journalism?
Well, fortunately, there's a lot more opportunities now than even when I was back then, and in different areas. You know, streaming has become a really big thing for schools. They're allowing kids to be behind the camera, in front of the camera, doing play-by-play analysis or directing. And so that's one way to get involved in the video aspects, and it helps with everything. From my perspective right now, versatility is the key. You want to do a lot of different things, because I'm multitasking now all the time. I used to not know how to shoot video or take photos. I volunteered when the Times was looking for volunteers, how to learn to shoot video. And that was one of the best things I ever did. Nobody else really volunteered. And I'm one of the few reporters that are still doing it, because I enjoyed it. I found out there's a different way to tell a story through video than it is writing. And now I can do it both ways. And so I think athletes should try and get involved in all this stuff, streaming or writing, because it's a great way to prepare for the future. If you become a great athlete, then you'll be able to create your own platform and be able to talk to people on the air. I remember it's still a problem, you know, dealing with certain athletes that still can't, that freeze up when you put a microphone in front of them because they don't know how to do it. Nowadays, it really shouldn't be a problem, because there's so many people and they're talking on and they're doing TikToks and stuff like that. I don't really get involved in that. So I'm trying to not get involved in everything. So I'm sticking with Twitter for now. I don't really do a whole lot of Instagram. I don't want to go too crazy, because I want to stay somewhat stable and stuff, you know. And but yeah, there's all these ways to do it. And if you want to write on your own, there's ways to create your own blog and all that. And so a lot of pro athletes now have their own little things that they announce things via Twitter or social media. So everything has changed a lot. You know, everybody So there's a lot of opportunities. You just have to make your own decisions, and there's really no excuses. There's so many ways to be part of the process in a positive way.
Yeah.
There's also many ways to do it in a negative way, and that's where the parents come in handy, and hopefully it will provide good guidance to way to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned two words that resonate immediately when you say it, and the first was opportunity. There's so much more opportunity, as you mentioned, with social media, videos, and this and that nature. But the other word that you mentioned that I truly believe is something that young people really have to understand the power of is volunteering. I feel like
Right.
being able to volunteer, being able to show somebody that, hey, I'm in love with this. I really enjoy doing this. I want to learn more. I want to help you. Volunteering is the way, volunteering for free.
Right.
Interning
Right.
is where you are basically going to separate yourself from a lot of the other candidates. And I feel like young people, you need to understand, especially if it's something that you're really passionate about. You want to work in sports. You want to be an SID. You want to be in marketing. You want to be coaching. You want to be a trainer, this, that, and the other. Oftentimes, to get your foot in the door, you have to work for free.
Right. It's really a great point, because that's what I did back in the 70s. I was volunteering, and I wrote for the local San Fernando Valley Sun, and I got paid like $15, but it wasn't the $15, it was getting published.
Yes.
And really, that is a great thing, volunteering for free. So many kids want to get paid for this and that, and they don't understand. As you said, you got to get inside the door. You have to have somebody to notice you and to see you up front, that you're going to show up on time or you're going to show up early. Then they see how dedicated you are. I mean, when I go to an event coverage and I see the other reporters showing up like 2 hours after I get there, they don't understand. I get there before everybody, and there's a reason for that. I don't want to get scooped, and I want to see the lay of the land, and I want to make sure I got a seat, because so many times people kick me out of things, and I want to know if I'm getting kicked out 2 hours before the game so I can have time to figure out a plan B,
Yeah.
And but I get back to your volunteering. That is such a great point. That's what I did. I don't really see it a whole lot these days, because for whatever reason they want to get paid. I understand you want to get paid, and I understand you shouldn't do things for free, but there is a positive in that.
Yes.
And it gets back to that point where we're all going into school when they're teaching delayed gratification versus long-term gratification and stuff, and nobody wants to hear about the delayed gratification.
Absolutely. Experience and opportunity oftentimes is better than, a paid by hour. And at the end of the day, I feel like it's the greatest separator, especially when you're talking about fields or areas of employment that everybody's trying to get in. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be able to separate yourself. So thank you for touching on that. I think that's so important, regardless if it's journalism, regardless if it's medicine, regardless if it's anything, any line of work. Young people, you got to be able to separate yourself, and that's the best way to do it, is volunteering, right? For those folks that are just tuning in, our featured guest tonight is none other than Mr. Eric Sondheimer. He is a legendary prep sports columnist, Hall of Famer, LA Times, 48 years in the business of covering high school sports as well as college sports as well. So, Mr. Sondheimer, this part of the IG Live, I just wanted to touch on a few topics and just hear your thoughts. I know you briefly mentioned it before, but I wanted to touch on, let's start with that issue and topic of private school versus public school. I mean, it's just not affecting Southern California. It's affecting Northern California. That's where I'm from, and parts of Texas and all over the country. Talk to us a little bit about what you've seen, what you're seeing, and how this problem can somewhat be, I don't know if it'll ever be fixed, but I mean, it just seems like the private schools are taking a good chunk of all the talent and leaving the public schools to where they have limited rosters and things of that nature. Talk to us a little bit about that topic.
Well, there's always going to be a little bit of tension between public and private. People want separate playoffs. That will never happen in California. There's laws and rules that will prevent that, from discrimination to other things. So you have to find a way that one is not toppling the other.
Yes.
And there's been, yes, the history was the public schools were better than the private schools many years ago, but occasionally you would have breakthroughs by the private schools. But now it's certainly at the highest level has gotten, there has been a separation. Certainly in football, you have St. John Bosco, Mater Dei, that's even pulled away from the private school. They've separated themselves. So yes, Mission Viejo is really good this year in football. Do I think that they would be able to beat Mater Dei or Bosco? I mean, I think it's still going to be hard. It's all about the offensive line and depth. Servite was the last really private school team that gave Bosco and Mater Dei a tough game since 2015. Other than Corona Centennial, they were the last public school team to win. Remember, Long Beach Poly used to be a dominant team in the public schools, but that has changed. I think a lot of their players have now gone on to play for private schools. So I would just say that the way that competitive equity is now happening in both the city section and the southern section, they're supposed to group teams based on competitive equity. That will create opportunities in certain divisions for public schools to rise up away from the upper division. So that's the way that you can succeed. But definitely at the highest level, I don't see a public school succeeding for the most part, except for an occasion like Corona Centennial basketball had a good run. They were winning it, and they won some things. Baseball, you have Corona baseball that won it last year, and they're going to be really tough again this year. So it's not. I think in football is where we've had. I'm a little disappointed. I'm a little bored every year that it's either Mater Dei or St. John Bosco, and I don't know how that's going to get fixed. Although this year there is a little bit of interesting going on. Mater Dei's freshman team doesn't have enough players, so this could be a sign that the future could be some interesting situation, because if you don't have a really strong freshman program, then that means the varsity down the road. But Coach Lara came in late, so I expect for him to start building up the freshman team next year. But that's a sign there could be an opening for somebody to step in there instead of Mater Dei down the road.
Absolutely. And that leads me to the next topic that I know you covered and talked about tremendously on your platform is the state of these high school transfers. It's, it's literally the wild, wild west. And I don't know if the high school has sort of bled into the college, or if the colleges, transferring has bled into the high school, but it just nowadays it seems like kids are going to 3 or 4 schools, and it's what's your take on all this?
Seriously, I've been writing about this for 48 years. I wrote the story years ago about Kennedy High basketball. They had a young guard, a 5'8" guard named Zach Lieberman. His father wanted to win a championship. Suddenly there were players from all over who were 6'8" or 6'9" arriving. They got put on probation. This has been going on for years. The difference is that the CIF waved the white flag of surrender years ago. They decided that they were no longer going to make people sit out a year for transferring. They decided that if you moved, you were eligible immediately, and if you moved for athletic reasons, that also didn't matter. And so everything, and they didn't want to lose money on lawyer fees. So that's kind of what happened. Mater Dei won a lawsuit, and ever since then, it's been, you go do what you want, just don't recruit, okay? And proving recruiting is very difficult. So you have a few times where people were declared ineligible. Like this year, there's been a couple players declared ineligible because they've tried to move for athletic reasons. They were high profile people. It's still on the books. If a section wants to make you ineligible for athletic reasons transferring, they can do that. They don't do that anymore for the majority of people, but I don't know. It's just so many more people transferring. There was over a record 17,000 this year that transferred. That's the big difference. It's a lot more. They still say that it's only 2% of the total people playing sports that transfer, but I don't think they realize the impact it has in certain sports like basketball. If you get multiple transfers, last year Palisades got into trouble when they had 9 transfers into their basketball program. So I understand what happened. They had all these openings after years that nobody could get into Palisades because they were overcrowded. Suddenly they allowed open enrollment. So they had 9 players transfer in. The problem was you have to transfer legitimately. You have to have a move, or you have to be in that attendance area for a public school. And
Yeah.
or you have to win the lottery if you're in a charter school type thing. So there's all these things going on. Um, so it's amazing how many people are transferring now. We all know what's going on. The parents, I've been on the sideline a couple times this year, and it's amazing what I hear. The parents after game, okay, we're transferring because we didn't play. I mean, so yeah, they have this option. And if I'm the coach, I would say, fine, just leave. We want people who want to play on our program. That's what you have to have. That's the attitude. You cannot worry if somebody's going to leave. Otherwise, you will fail miserably.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's oftentimes the players have the leverage and the power, and sometimes it's really unfortunate. And I feel like the stronger programs have the tradition and oftentimes are able to say, okay, good player, if you don't like it here, you can go somewhere else. But
Right.
some of these schools just have a hard time, and they're willing to bend over backwards. And for some of these schools, and it's gotten ugly, it's gotten nasty, but it is what it is, and we're starting to see it with the transfer portal in college. And I mean, that's a whole nother beast, and that's money motivated.
I think college has followed the high schools. High schools was doing this long before the colleges. The big thing for colleges now is they made it, you can transfer year by year. So they've created a complete mess. Good luck to them. Good luck to wanting to coach at that level. I would never do that because you coach because you want to help kids grow up. And if somebody doesn't want to listen to you, they just leave. And it's really, to me, that would be just so sad and so disgusting that you put in 3 years of hard work and then they just walk away. I would never be able to do that. And so, yeah, all the young coaches getting involved, good luck to you. You know what you're getting into, but I would never do that in today's age. And it's changed, and I accept that. Okay, I'm not going to say, but just still follow the rules. You have to follow. If you follow the transfer rules, you'll be fine. I don't have a problem with the parents picking whatever school they want. It's there. It's just when you start to do things wrong and don't follow the rules, that's when you get into trouble.
Yeah. I definitely think as a young coach, or it doesn't matter, young or older coach, I kind of feel like you have to develop a personal mantra or a personal belief. And you got to be willing to either win the wrong way or lose the right way. And I feel like that's the biggest thing that a lot of coaches, sort of get caught up in is, integrity, morals, ethics, and things of that nature. And oftentimes, is winning more important to who's its own? So I think that's important. Let's quickly jump on the topic of holdbacks, because I know this is also something that you have talked about before in terms of, you got these high school players that are freshmen driving the games, or high school players that are much older than their grade. What's your take on the holdback rule, the reclassification, and things of that nature? I mean, it's just, to me personally, when you have a holdback who's much stronger, much smarter in terms of experience and things like that, it creates a competitive advantage. I see why people do it, but multiple years, I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, it could end up changing now that we have NIL deals going on, because you want to get out of high school quicker to get maybe earn some money. So maybe the parents are having second thoughts about doing that and stuff. But it's their decision. I understand it. I'm not going to criticize somebody who holds them back. It's whatever they feel is right. I mean, I've seen it work both ways. There's a great player at Banning this year, Steven Perez, who started his senior year, 16 years old. He's committed to Utah Tech, so he's going to get that scholarship. But I also understand now with the portal, if you're not physically ready, I understand a lot of coaches aren't going to give you a chance if you're 16 years old, because they need to win immediately.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to lose their job. So they want a man coming into college who's ready to go at it, and they may not be patient enough to wait a year or two until you're physically ready. So yeah, the changing college environment is definitely going to change the way people in high school deal with things. I don't think people realize what's coming at them right now. Some of them don't understand that the scholarships are going down. Like in baseball, they're dropping the roster limits, and already people that had committed this year to schools are announcing on Twitter, I'm no longer committed because I've lost my position. And so If you get somebody that offers you something, you better do your investigation and make a strong commitment and understand that it's now both ways. You know, you can't just be playing games these days because there's going to be a limited amount of spots for people coming out of high school now with the transfer portal. That just so many more opportunities for coaches to find people who've already proven themselves at the college level or even the JC level. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting little adjustment for everybody involved. And personally, I think it's a lot of people are going to have to get used to maybe going to a small school. And this is the one thing that I like about the transfer portal. You can go to a Division III school, become this superstar, and then you could go to a USC or UCLA and not worry about it. It's automatic. And so that's the one positive. I already saw that happen with the kid out at Culver City, the quarterback. Went to Bryant University, became a great player there, and just transferred to Washington State this year. So that's the one positive, in my opinion, of the college thing.
Absolutely. It just seemed like youth and high school sports have become so professionalized these days. And as a coach, as a parent, especially as a student athlete, like you got to be informed, and that's the biggest thing. The scholarship numbers are dissipating for young high school kids. They're going getting transfers and things of that nature. Just like you said, I think you're right. I think the biggest thing is to be able to really, as a senior in high school, as a junior in high school, to not always keep your eyes on the big Power 4 or Power 5 school. Like just to understand, do your homework, realize that there's colleges and universities all over the country. And, if it's my child, or anybody that I know is, I'd want to go to a school where, I don't want my child to be able to have the mentality of ducking competition, so to speak, but I would want them going to a high school or a college where they're not having to look over their shoulder every other year, finding out, okay, what recruit is coming to take the spot. You know what I mean? It's just, it's almost like there's no more loyalty and there's no more development. Like you said before, these coaches are under so much significant pressure to win that they're not grooming, or I shouldn't say groom, they're not developing student athletes like they once used to.
Yeah, particularly at certain positions like quarterback, everybody wants to play, but there just aren't enough spots. There's one ball to play quarterback. And so that's the position that seems like the transfer portal is not only happening in college, but at the high school level are pretty amazing that every year there's one school that gets a transfer every year and they kind of claim, I don't know, it's a coincidence or not. No, it's not a coincidence. We all know what's going on at that level.
I just feel bad for the kid that played JV, that waited his turn or waited her turn and is looking for an opportunity to finally get their shot. And they find the news in July or, whatever the season their sport is, that, hey, such and such is coming in, and it's debilitating. It can be debilitating. And, when you teach these kids to buy in and to be loyal and to stick with something and trust the process, right? You tell them to trust the process, but then they're finding out like, somebody's coming in like a thief in the night, taking their spot that they've waited for. It's just tough. It's tough to accept. And I know it's a mess, but it is what it is. So it's very interesting. Moving on, just in terms of advice that you would give for a modern day student athlete, whether it be, a young student athlete that's about to be in high school very shortly, or a student athlete that's in high school now, talking about the importance of being a good person, keeping a clean social media, doing well in school. What are some advice or tips that you would give that you've learned through your years that, you would sit a young man or a young woman down and say, here's the recipe to go as far as you can to hopefully reach your full potential? What would you say?
Well, with social media now, there's lots of opportunities to interact with people in other media. And I will give you the example of somebody who everybody in the media just became so enamored with because of his personality and how polite he was. And that's Peyton Woodard out of St. John Bosco.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
His dad is a policeman. So I think that's one reason why he was so polite. But he would just associate with other reporters and say thank you. And he was so respectful. And no matter what he did on the field, everybody loved him. And he got to end up going to Alabama, but then he decommitted and went to Oregon. I will never say anything bad about that kid, whether he's good or bad on the field. He's just a great kid. And so what people should learn is to be polite with everybody, whether you're meeting them or not, whether they say something good or bad about you. Just be upfront and honest. And if you want to send out your film or whatever to somebody, you're welcome to do that, and just say thank you. Everybody appreciates saying thank you and being consistent. The toughest thing is when things don't go well and somebody says something about you and then they're testing you. I've always done this little test that to me, it really says something about it. After a playoff game, I go up to somebody who's a really good player and I try to ask them a question, because it's hard. And this is to the losing team, because it's hard for them to be able to deal with defeat. And if that person is able to answer the question without, running away, then that tells me they're mature enough to go to the next level and play immediate college. And it's worked. I bring up the story of Casey Clausen. He was crying in Alameda High School after he lost and got killed by Modern Day. But there he was on the field in tears answering the questions. He'd go on to start immediately as a freshman at Tennessee because he was mature enough to move forward and stuff. And I've even done that this year in the Orange Lutheran St. John Bosco game last week. Orange Lutheran played great. They just lost to St. John Bosco in the last second. I went up to their great tight end and asked him, and he was fine. He answered the question. So he's going to Arizona State. I can tell all the Arizona Sun, this kid is ready to play immediately. He dealt with defeat right there, and he was moving on. So it's a really good lesson from my perspective. I get to see the maturity, because I went up to a Granada Hills quarterback one time, and he ran away from me. I'm not talking to you. And we never heard from him again. He had committed to a college. So there's nothing wrong with running away from a reporter. I understand that. But it shows you where you're at in your maturity if you want to play at the next level. All it means is you're not ready. You'll need a year or two of developing and learning the lesson of wins and losses. But that shows you how you deal with adversity. And hopefully coaches are teaching that, and I know most do.
Well said. Well said. I couldn't echo, like when you mentioned Peyton Woodyard, I couldn't, agree with you any more. I mean, it's funny because I remember when he was a freshman, and this was probably 2021, I had reached out to him to actually be on the show, because I oftentimes interview student athletes on this show as well. And as a freshman, the poise that he had, and this is after his season, right? So this was in the spring, and you just got to root for a kid that's personable, that's polite, that has a positive attitude. So shout out to his mom, Nora, and his dad, Gerald. I mean, they're just a great family. I'm really looking forward to seeing them play Ohio State this weekend. So that should be a good one. So yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate you bringing that, because you can learn a lot about a young person and their character, when they're going through some adversity, and that's something that I feel like a lot of us tend to forget. To forget.
Yeah, it's hard to lose. I understand that, but it's also a learning experience. And so I really, and it's hard to learn when you're a teenager. You don't want to lose with that. So I try to be sensitive, but if you're going on to college next year, and the way college has become so big, you better be able to deal with a poor little high school reporter just asking a simple question. And I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, but secretly, it is my test. I'm sorry, but I want to see for myself, so in the future I can say this person handled it pretty well.
Got it. By the way, this random thought came to mind. There's a young lady, Windward High School. I think I sent you this message earlier. I don't know if you got it, but her name is Amel Cook, basketball player. When I tell you, you need to look her up and check her out this year. Very talented player. She's probably already about 5'11", 6 feet. Mom went to Cal. I actually went to school with her. Mom played basketball at Cal. Dad was a college player as well. Make sure you look out for Windward. They're going to have a really good girls basketball program this year.
Well, they open up against Ontario Christian, which happens to be one of the top 3 teams in Southern California. Yes. So we will find out immediately about her.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Sondheimer, I want to thank you for your time, man. I appreciate you. I know that I've reached out to you this summer, and you were gracious enough to honor this request. In closing, in this IG Live, I just kind of, this is the Oscar or Grammy moment, and this is an opportunity for you to, say hello or say thank you or give your roses to people that have helped you along the way or whatever it may be. So, the mic is yours. If there's anything you'd like to say in closing.
I just hope people keep reading newspapers. We've reached the point where it's very important to support your local newspaper. I understand it. We have things where you can subscribe for $1 for 3 months, and people won't even do that. And that's a sad situation. I understand that sometimes people don't like the editorials of certain papers, like the LA Times maybe, but if you really want to support newspapers, we do our job, whether there's an earthquake or whether there's positive things going on. We need to be around to watch over people and to support people. And I hope people will subscribe, whether it's the Times or somebody else, to keep going. I mean, I'm 66 years old. I'm hoping to keep doing this as long as I'm healthy, but we need to keep doing it. I'll be fine if the LA Times ever closes, but I don't think Southern California will be fine if the LA Times ever closes. So please keep supporting newspapers. They're very important.
Well said. Well, Mr. Sondheimer, I appreciate your time, man. This has been something that I've been looking forward to, and I know that a lot of our young people, parents and coaches in this who are able to listen are going to benefit from your experience. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a good night.
Take care.
There we have it, folks. Legendary Hall of Fame prep sports columnist, Mr. Eric Sondheimer. We finally got him on the Student First, Athlete Second IG Live. Been covering high school sports for 48 years, folks. For 48 years. I believe roughly since around 1976. So when you think about the student athletes that he's seen, that he's covered all throughout the years, Allison Felix, Olympians, John Elway he had mentioned, Darryl Strawberry, a lot of the LA greats and Southern California greats, especially basketball, Harden, Westbrook, all these great players. It's a testament to his longevity. It's a testament to his work ethic, the fact that he's been in this business so long and done so well and done so right by many of these young student athletes. So, Mr. Sondheimer, salute. And many more years of coverage. I'm trying to figure out which high school football game you're going to be going to, because oftentimes if I know he's at a high school game, that's the game that I know I don't necessarily have to go to because he's going to be reporting the score on Twitter. So, my man, you're doing it the right way. So I just want to thank you all for tuning in. Once again, if you tuned in late, all previous 104 episodes can be seen on the David Watts Consulting YouTube channel. All right. This is episode number 105. Okay. So a lot of the guests that we've come on here have shared a tremendous amount of wisdom, a tremendous amount of just knowledge of their success, of their failures, and things of that nature. So I really encourage